I'm Seth Dillon. I'm the CEO of the Babylon Bee, the world's most trusted, factually accurate news source. Our tagline is fake news you can trust. It sounds like we have some fans of the Bee here. You guys have heard of the Bee, right? A lot of you have heard of the Babylon Bee? Okay. These talks go a lot better if you've heard of it. It's really hard to explain it. I've actually come with a little bit of a presentation for you today. I want to show you a few things. I think it's easier to show than tell some of these experiences that we've had, but also some of these issues that we've run into with censorship and fact-checking and all this nonsense. I want to lead off with a quote from a great English writer. His name is G.K. Chesterton. Have you heard of that guy? He said, "The world has become too absurd to be satirized." In 1911, he said that. The world has become too absurd to be satirized. There are a lot of things happening today that were not happening back in 1911. I don't even know what he would say today. But it's interesting he makes that comment because, we wake up every morning and we read the headlines and we have to try to satirize what's in the news. And that is becoming an increasingly challenging job. So I want to show you some examples. I'll just show you a few examples, just to jog your memory and just remind you of some of the things. Like, these are real headlines. I'm going to show you real headlines first. We'll start with those. Fiery but mostly peaceful protests after police shooting. Do you guys remember this? The man is standing in front of burning cars. And they're telling us, this is gaslighting, right? But have you ever seen gaslighting like this? In real time, while you're looking at damage, destruction, violence, they're telling you that it's mostly peaceful. Transgender weightlifter Laurel Hubbard named Sportswoman of the Year. Not the Babylon Bee. Washington University creates segregated housing specifically for black students. We're fighting racism with segregation? Review analysis. This one's funny. Stanford students are more likely to wear masks on bicycles than helmets. That is some skewed risk assessment. The smart kids go to Stanford, right? I thought. Masks on bicycles. What is a mask going to do for you on a bicycle? Can men get pregnant? Is it possible? This is healthline.com. This is not the Babylon Bee. This is healthline.com. Yes, it's possible for men to become pregnant and give birth to children of their own. In fact, it's probably a lot more common than you think. In order to explain, we'll need to break down some common misconceptions about how we understand the term man. So the people telling you that men can become pregnant are going to break down misconceptions for you. It's astonishing, isn't it? But this is what we're dealing with. The world has become too absurd to be satirized. It's very difficult to parody that which is already a parody of itself. And it's really interesting what ends up happening when you're doing satire in this environment. I mean, if you guys understand the process of satire at all, I don't know if any of you have ever tried to write satire before. But what you need to do is exaggerate the truth to make your point, right? You go beyond the truth in the direction that the truth is pointing, and you exaggerate it. Well, how do you do that when reality is so crazy? How do you do that when it's so absurd? It's very difficult. So what ends up happening is your jokes sometimes end up coming true. So it's almost like a fulfilled prophecy. This is actually what we call them. We call them fulfilled prophecies. We have a spreadsheet where we're keeping track of these things. We have 67 of these right now. 67 times we have made a joke that later came true. I'm going to show you some examples of these as well. I know this is kind of an unusual presentation probably that you guys aren't used to seeing. A lot of times this is about policy and stuff like this. We're not doing that. We're having a little more fun tonight. These are examples of jokes that came true. So I'm going to start out with a headline that we wrote on the Babylon Bee, and then I'm going to show you an example of a real news story that fulfilled the prophecy. CNN criticizes Israel Arab leaders for shaking hands in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, well, this is in September of 2020, and we were thinking to ourselves, how would CNN cover this like momentous occasion? What are they going to be focused on? Are they going to be focused on what really matters here? Or are they going to focus on some little way they can try to pick at Trump? Now, I highlighted for you in the bottom left of this. Maybe some of you in the back can't see, but it says this was at 2:23 p.m. on September 15th of 2020. We wrote this headline. It's not hysterical, but it's just a jab at CNN. This is at 7:28 p.m. the same day. White House largely disregards coronavirus precautions during Abraham Accords signing. That is how CNN chose to cover it. Now, it started as a joke early in the day, and by the evening, it was reality. And we start to wonder, did they plagiarize our website? Are they coming to us for ideas? It's a little eerie. Progressive Church announces new drag queen Bible story hour. That's a Babylon Bee headline. But this is not. Lutheran Church hosts drag queen prayer time for children. We're trying to come up with something absurd and crazy, and then this happens. BLM rioters awarded Nobel Peace Prize. You got the guy standing there with the ski mask on. There's fire all around. A Molotov cocktail exploded right next to his feet, and he's accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, this is a real news headline. Black Lives Matter movement nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. The global impact of BLM is cited in raising awareness and consciousness of racial justice. California bill prohibits stores from selling toys that don't actively confuse children's sexuality. I like the way that's phrased. You got the little inquisitive kid there trying to figure out, do I like this toy? I can't tell. It's not pink. So this is in California. This is we're trying to focus in on one state. Well, this is a real headline. Not too long afterwards, California, first state to mandate gender-neutral toy aisles for large retails. Mandate gender-neutral toy aisles. Another Newsom one. Newsom's fun. Gavin Newsom named U-Haul Salesperson of the Year. Now, it's kind of sad. We don't want everybody leaving California and coming to our states, do we? But they are. Now I'm going to show you a real Fox headline here. Not too long. This was January 7th. Californians fleeing for Texas so fast that U-Haul runs out of trucks for them. This is a fun one. To improve public perception, Kamala Harris taking likability lessons from Hillary Clinton. That's a joke. Nobody's going to take likability lessons from Hillary Clinton. That would never happen. Never in a million years. Wait a second. White House asks Hillary staffers how to make Kamala more likable. It's almost the same picture. Is it the same? No. When did we do ours? July of 2021, and then this was August of 2021. A month later. We're giving them ideas. Maybe we should stop. Trump. I have done more for Christianity than Jesus. True or false? Satire or reality? Well, in December of 2019, this was satire. We will fast forward with my little green clicker button. Trump is currently calling into Flashpoint, a prophecy-focused conservative talk show on Kenneth Copeland's Victory Network, or Victory Channel. Nobody has done more for Christianity or for evangelicals or for religion itself than I have. This is a joke about Trump's ego. He says these crazy, outlandish things. We just, we thought, well, maybe he would say something like this. And sure enough, it took a little while. This was September of 2021, so it took 2 years for that one to come true. But this is one of the ways that, it's one of the interesting ways that comedy is under attack. It's not one of the deliberate ways. There are deliberate ways, and I'll get to those. But this is one of the unintentional ways that comedy is under attack. We're making the world so crazy, it's almost impossible to satirize it. When you do satirize it, you're barely staying a step ahead of reality. It's kind of funny, but it's also kind of disconcerting. It's also kind of depressing. There are some other ways that they are coming after comedy a little bit more deliberately. And that's with this kind of limiting what you're allowed to say. right? This speech suppression stuff, this making rules about what you can and can't joke about. You guys ever heard the expression punching down? You're not allowed to punch down. Do I have water up here? I do. You are not allowed to punch down. Now, you guys probably saw what happened with Dave Chappelle recently. There was an effort to cancel him. There's an effort to cancel Joe Rogan. Dave Chappelle was punching down. Now, punching down is this expression that's used to describe comedy that aims at the wrong target, right? There's supposed to be these power structures, and people with power are not supposed to joke about people who don't have power, right? So, but it's weird how this works when you think about it, because you're really reinforcing this idea that some people are above others when you try to tell them they can't joke about people who are beneath them. What is it? Okay, imagine thinking to yourself for a second. I know none of you in this room have ever had this thought because it's absurd, but imagine thinking to yourself, you know what? I shouldn't joke about those people. They're beneath me. How condescending is that? Who would have that thought? Like, what kind of person do you have to be to think, I can't joke about those people, they're beneath me? But they want you to think that way. They actually want you to think that way. They want me to think that if I'm going to make a joke about women, then I'm joking about people who are beneath me. They have less power than me. I shouldn't joke about them. I think we're all created equal. I don't think women are beneath me, right? Shouldn't we be able to joke about each other indiscriminately? Yeah, don't make me do one of those Jeb Bush please clap things. Please clap. It's true, though. You know, you reinforce these ideas. There's supposed to be this hierarchical structure that you're supposed to find where your place is on this structure, and you're supposed to lay off the people who are beneath you. Well, that just reinforces a lot of the stereotypes that they suggest are racist, misogynist, sexist, etc. This idea, though, that we need to be insulated from these jokes. Well, first of all, I think there's an important point to make here. The people who you're not supposed to joke about, the marginalized and the oppressed. It's one of the ways that you can kind of tell who holds all the cultural and institutional power in a society is who you're not allowed to criticize, who you're not allowed to joke about. It's supposed to be that you're not allowed to joke about them because you have more power than them. But if you can't joke about them, they have the power, right? If they have both the will and the power to punish you for criticizing them or making fun of them, do you have the power? Or do they? They're the oppressor. You're the one who's marginalized. You're the one who's silencing and censoring yourself so that you don't get in trouble. And this is something that comes up a lot. When I especially when I engage with students, I get asked all the time. Like, people will ask me, I'm worried about censorship. I'm worried about if I speak my mind, if I say what I think, or if I make the wrong joke, somebody's going to get mad, somebody's going to get upset, so I don't say anything. How do you deal with that? How do you approach that? What are we supposed to do with that? Well, you certainly don't censor yourself. If you censor yourself, you're doing the tyrant's work for him. You need to be willing to speak the truth boldly and say what you make them censor you, right? Take that power away from them and don't give them something that they should have to take from you by force. This idea that we don't want to be offended, punching down is one of the phrases that's often used for this, and then you have this idea of safe spaces. You guys have heard of safe spaces, right? Everybody wants their safe space. Nobody wants to be offended. Hopefully, none of you think you're in a safe space tonight. But I think this idea is really harmful too. Safety is a weird word right now. I think it's one of those words where we get it all wrong, and we often do things that are supposed to be in the interest of our safety, and it's actually counterproductive. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but there was like this effort in New York. There was a nonprofit group in New York that was trying to make playgrounds safer. New York was trying to make playgrounds safer. The nonprofit was trying to study these playgrounds to determine if they were beneficial to children. Have you guys heard about this at all? It's an interesting study that was done. So these playgrounds, they started putting in all this like really soft turf that was really cushioned, and you couldn't fall from any high heights. They took away all the heights. They took away all the danger on the playground. And the interesting result of that was kids didn't learn that there was risk involved in playing on the playground. They didn't learn risk assessment at all. They ended up being Stanford kids wearing masks instead of helmets. What ended up happening was they would actually leave the playground and go get hurt somewhere else doing something stupid because they didn't realize that falling from a height onto concrete is painful. You know, you take away the risk, you take away the consequence of behaving, you know, stupidly, and you take away the danger of that, and it's bad for kids, actually. They determined that the playgrounds were too safe. I think that's a great illustration. It's a great analogy for the situation that we have going on with ideas right now. We're trying to insulate college kids from ideas that might make them feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Is that good for them, do you think? Is that good for youth to insulate them from ideas that challenge their preconceptions or make them feel the slightest bit uncomfortable or challenge them in ways that they don't want to be challenged? I don't think that's good for them at all. I think it's going to have really bad results. I think it's going to be similar to what they've tried to do with these playgrounds. The other interesting way that comedy is under attack is with this deliberate effort of censorship, which is kind of, there's a roundabout and weird way that they do it with us. So, you know, oftentimes when they try to cancel somebody, they try to cancel Joe Rogan, right? They go after, like, statements that he said in the past. They'll dig up something that he said on an old podcast. They'll try to find some personality who tweeted something back when they were 19 years old, and they dig that up, and they try to run them out of a job as a result of that. With us, it's weird. Like, they don't have a lot of things that we said in the past, and we're making jokes. So what they do is they fact-check them. They fact-check them and rate them false. And they have all kinds of policies about false information and how dangerous that is. I want to show you some examples of some headlines of ours that were fact-checked, and this is just ridiculous stuff. But I'll start with this one here. CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin news before publication. All right, now if you ask Snopes, you mentioned Snopes earlier, if you ask Snopes, why do they fact-check these articles? Well, they will say, because they cross a certain threshold where so many people are asking, is this true? And when they cross that threshold, then we have to fact-check it. We have to. And that's what determines we fact-check your stories. Okay, well, what about this one? I can't imagine that a single person, by the way, I just told our staff the other day, this was a classic of ours, this was in 2018 that we published this, and Facebook threatened to deplatform us and demonetize us because we were spreading fake news on their platform because Snopes said this was false. We're actually going to put this in our store. We're going to put a CNN washing machine in our store. You're going to actually be able to buy one of these soon. I don't know how many will sell, but that's just crazy. I mean, this is one of these situations where they're looking for excuses. I don't believe for 1 second that there were people who were reporting this story and thinking that it was true. CNN praises Taliban for wearing masks during attack. This one is a little more believable. Taliban fighters responsibly wearing masks. They're cloth masks, which are, you know. So we're often criticized for this. You know, people will tell us, your jokes are too believable. They're too believable. You are fooling people. I think you are misinformation under the guise of satire. Those are the words of the New York Times, by the way. I'm quoting them. Misinformation under the guise of satire. There's this accusation. They don't like our jokes. They don't like the target of our jokes. Nobody on the left wants us making fun of CNN. CNN is perfect. They've never done anything wrong. They don't like the fact that our jokes are close to reality. But think about it. I mean, come on, everybody knows that there's a grain of truth in every joke, right? You've all heard the saying, it's funny because it's true. If your joke is so divorced from reality that nobody could possibly believe it was true, then how is it going to be funny? It's not going to land. Nobody's going to get the point. These jokes have to be attached to reality. They have to be close to reality. The problem is not that our satire is too close to reality. The problem is that reality is too close to satire. That's what they're not getting, right? And the ones criticizing us are the ones playing a role in making that be the case. Ocasio-Cortez appears on The Price is Right, guesses everything is free. Now, this one I think is somewhat believable because, it's a great Photoshop, first of all. Our graphic artist did a great job making it look like she was actually sitting there wearing AOC name tag, guessing free for some luxury vacation in Costa Rica or something like that. This was fact-checked. It was fact-checked. They did their research. They called around. They asked The Price is Right. Did you ever host Ocasio-Cortez? Is this a real image? Rated it false. Ninth Circuit Court overturns death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, someone's really going to kick out of that one. Someone help me out here. What does it mean to overturn somebody's death? What does that mean? Is that a resurrection? What is that? Did the Ninth Circuit Court resurrect her? Is she back? So, this one was fact-checked by USA Today. They cited 15 sources. 15 sources in their lengthy refutation of this joke. And they explain in the sources and in the comments down below, they looked into it. They checked the Ninth Circuit Court's website. They can't find anything about it overturning Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. They placed phone calls. They looked into it. 15, I'm serious. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you go down below the citations, the lengthy citations, you get to a little italicized small font thing that says this fact check was paid for in part by grants from Facebook. So Facebook pays USA Today to go out there and fact check our jokes, and rate them false, and then Facebook threatens to deplatform us for publishing fake news. What sense does that make? This is crazy. Are jokes really that dangerous? It's weird. We've reached this point. As far as the left is concerned, jokes are no longer funny, they're false. And false information is dangerous. I'm serious. They think this stuff is dangerous. It's crazy. I think it's weird that they focus on these examples. I mean, this is a really silly example. I think the washing machine one, come on, if you're going to pick something to threaten to kick us off the platform for, make it the CNN Taliban thing or something like that. Why the washing machine spinning jokes or this resurrection myth? Jokes are no longer funny, they're false. So why is this the case? Why are they going after comedians, humorists, satirists? This is a free speech issue. These are ideas that they're trying to shut down. I think that one of the reasons that comedy in particular is under attack is because it's so effective. I think this is one of those things, when I mentioned earlier that the New York Times was saying that we are a far-right misinformation site that sometimes traffics in misinformation under the guise of satire. Those are their exact words. That's how they describe the Babylon Bee. A far-right misinformation site that sometimes traffics in misinformation. Why are they describing us that way? Why are they coming after us that way? Well, I think it's because satire is effective. And I'm often asked if it bothers me, if I'm discouraged by this, if I'm worried about the fact that the New York Times talks about us that way. Are you kidding me? You know what would really concern me? If the New York Times liked us. That would concern me. The fact that they're attacking us, I say this to especially to students. I'm like, when they attack you, it means you're over the target. You're doing something right. I think we need to be encouraged by that. And ultimately, I think it's self-defeating. I think these efforts to suppress any kind of speech, but especially comedians, because they look like humorless scolds when they come after comedians. It's really not a good look for them to be attacking us, and it always backfires, and they always apologize. It always looks bad. We got a retraction from the New York Times within 5 days of demanding it. 5 days. It's a bad look for them. But it has this kind of self-defeating, backfiring effect. Have you guys heard of the Streisand effect? Anybody heard of that? There's a Wikipedia page about it if you want to look it up. But Barbara Streisand was trying to suppress these aerial pictures of her home that she didn't want anybody to see. I guess it was a privacy thing for her. And so she sued whoever took these pictures. These pictures have been viewed 12 times on some obscure website somewhere. But the lawsuit attracted attention. And then the pictures attracted attention as a result of the lawsuit. And next thing you know, they've been viewed millions of times. And this is what happens, I think, oftentimes with these attempts to silence people and suppress voices. They draw attention to the things that they're trying to suppress. They amplify the voices they're trying to silence. It's happened with us. And this happens up to a point, right? Because there will potentially come a point here in the near future where we get booted off of Facebook. We did a joke recently that was cited as a violation of the hate speech policy. And it all comes down to this thing with punching down. You know, Facebook has released these new guidelines back in June of 2021. There was some case that the oversight board, they now have an oversight board, they had some ruling and decided there needs to be a carve-out for satire. You have to have some kind of accommodation for satire on the platform. But it can't be just anything goes. There have to be some limitations to it. And so they were thinking, they consulted with a bunch of comedians and humorists and satirists. They didn't consult with us. We never heard from them. But they reached this conclusion that, okay, satire is okay as long as it doesn't punch down, as long as it's not hate speech under the guise of satire. Well, who's making that determination? You know, I talked a moment ago about how, you know, you can tell who holds the power and based on who you're allowed to criticize and who you're not, and who's marginalized. It's really the opposite of what they say. You know, we are not punching down. We're punching back. We're punching back. And I think conservatives have been on the ropes in the culture war for so long, and that we're really in this defensive posture where we are punching back. And if anything, I think it's much more accurate to say that we're punching up, because the ideas that we're attacking, the ones that get flagged for hate speech on Facebook, we are attacking ideas that come from the top down. They come from politicians, they come from celebrities, they come from the biggest corporations, they come from the media. You know, these are ideas that are coming from the top down, and they're imposing them on us, and we are fighting back against that. You know, we're not trying to advance the popular narrative. We're trying to poke holes in it. So we are responding to, and I think the satirist's job, you know, typically when you try to describe what the satirist's job is to speak truth to power. You're like the court jester, you know, you're making fun of the king. Well, that's what we're doing. We're doing it, and they don't like it, and they're trying to say we're punching down. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But we're not ridiculing the person, and this is, I think, where they're getting it wrong. You know, they're trying to say that the target of our jokes is some individual that we're bullying or something like that. That's not the case at all. If I could summarize what our mission statement is and put it as succinctly as possible, I would say it's to ridicule bad ideas. Ridicule bad ideas. And I think, you know, sometimes people look at me when I say that, and they kind of get this concerned look on their face, like you just used the word ridicule in your mission, you know, like that sounds really negative. I think it's a moral good to ridicule bad ideas. I really do. There's a great quote by C.S. Lewis. He's my favorite author. He said that good philosophy must exist if for no other reason because bad philosophy needs to be answered. Good philosophy must exist if for no other reason because bad philosophy needs to be answered. Satire, comedy, humor, it's necessary for exactly the same reason. To deal with bad ideas, to mock them, to ridicule them, to tear them down before they take root in the minds and hearts of young people who are going to try to turn them into policies and laws. So I think it has a very important role to play in that. I'm going to quote Chesterton again because he's great. He says it so much better than I possibly could. But he said, humor can get in under the door while seriousness is still fumbling at the handle. And that's a great way of putting it, I think. It's one of those things that's why comedy is so effective, because when you wrap a message in the package of humor, it's more easily delivered and received. It's one of the reasons why humor is the best vehicle for truth delivery, because of how disarming it is. And I think, you know, we're able to publish articles on all kinds of topics, even controversial topics like abortion, for example, that go viral, where if you had just talked about it seriously and tried to bludgeon people over the head with a serious argument and destroy them and tear them down or insult them or whatever, you wouldn't get anywhere. But if you find the right angle for a joke, it can actually be very effective in getting through to people. And that is the primary reason, I think, that comedy, in particular the comedy that we're doing from a conservative perspective, is under attack. So I think, you know, our responses to this when we're dealing with these kinds of issues, and people ask us if we're discouraged, no, we're not. I think that they're drawing attention to us. I think that they're making our voice louder. I think that it means that we're being effective. I think it means we're doing something right. So I'm very encouraged by that, and I encourage people all the time to continue to speak the truth boldly. Don't censor yourself. Don't do the tyrant's work for him. Don't go and run to other platforms. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the other platforms. There's a time and a place for the other platforms, and I think a lot of them, though, these alternatives do become somewhat like echo chambers. You know, if you sideline yourself from where the conversation is, you're just removing yourself from it. You're removing a reasonable voice from where it should be. We should be out there fighting. We should be out there engaged in the conversation. Make them ban you, right? Make them censor you. Make them ban you. They probably will if you get enough time, if you're provocative enough. I've had a lot of warnings on my accounts. I'm not expecting to stay on Instagram for too much longer. It seems like they're winning. It seems like they have the upper hand. I don't know where things are going with the direction with the social media stuff. I'd be very interested to talk to some of the people in this room who have their finger on the pulse of the policy discussions around like Section 230 and what's the right move to make there. I think Justice Thomas's comments are really interesting about the common carrier doctrine and how that might be applied there. I don't know. I'm just a guy who makes jokes on the internet, so I'm not going to talk to you about all that stuff. But I do think, you know, whether or not we currently under the law have a right to be on these platforms, even though they're run by private companies, that's a big debate to have, and whether or not they should have immunity for engaging in politically motivated viewpoint discrimination, which they clearly are doing. Those are all big discussions, but I don't think that we should ever relegate ourselves to, you know, going and whispering in the corners amongst ourselves rather than being out there in the public square and engaging in the conversation, speaking the truth boldly, and daring them to ban us, to try to silence us and amplify our voices. So, you know, this idea of punching down and all of that, I think that what we're trying to do is speak the truth to culture. And sometimes it's deemed hateful when you say something that is uncomfortable for somebody to hear. It's not what they want to hear. I think one of the most loving things that you can do for another person is to tell them the truth. So I'll close with this one last quote from Harold Clurman. He said, "Make them laugh, and while their mouths are open, pour truth in." I like that. That's good. We're trying to do that at the Babylon Bee. So thank you.